I want to quote to you one paragraph of the little gem of a daily homily of Pope Francis. We have a whole new way of papal teaching that's taking place in these homilies every morning. And yesterday's homily, it seemed, set the tone very much for this conference in Montreal and also for the presentation this morning. This is what Pope Francis said yesterday. Evangelization is not proselytizing, but it takes place by attraction, by witness, and by preaching. The Pope went on to warn Christians who are afraid to build bridges and who prefer to build walls are Christians who are not sure of their faith and not sure of Jesus Christ. The Pope then exhorted Christians to do as Paul did by building bridges and moving forward. Finally, he said, Paul teaches us this journey of evangelization because Jesus did, because he is well aware that evangelization is not proselytizing. It is because Paul was sure of Jesus Christ and did not need to justify himself. The Synod of Bishops last October on the theme of the new evangelization and the transmission of the Christian faith took place at a time when there was a certain heaviness, if you will, a great deal of questioning in the church. I believe that the events of the past 3 months are giving a whole new light to what took place at the Synod on the new evangelization. As Father Lombardi said to me at the end of the time after Pope Francis was elected, Tom, you sat in the Synod Hall for all of October, and you listened, and listened. And the past 2 months have given us a chance to put into practice what we heard and spoke about last October. Among the 257 delegates in the Synod Hall, there were 170 bishops who were chosen by episcopal conferences throughout the world. In addition, 25 prelates or heads of the Vatican dicasteries in the departments, one of them, of course, a Canadian, Cardinal Marc Ouellet. 35 other bishops were appointed by Pope Benedict from around the world to fill in those gaps or the places where bishops had not come from or different areas that should be present. 10 major superiors of religious congregations, including Father Nicolas, the general of the Jesuits, whose words that were spoken at that synod now even take on a deeper meaning. Plus 30 women delegates at the synod, the most women ever present at any synod of bishops. Plus a whole series of what they call fraternal delegates, representatives of our sister churches. And one of the most interesting addresses at the synod was given by then the head of the Anglican Communion, Archbishop Rowan Williams, a very, very moving address. And in the course of the synod, there were a number of major events. October the 11th was the 50th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council. October the 17th, the canonization of 7 saints, the last canonization of Benedict, and among them was, of course, Caterina Caquitha. Among the 4 Canadian bishop delegates, we're privileged to have 2 with us this morning. Let me just tell you about both of them. I had the privilege of, I've known them for many years and have been able to work with them, but I really saw them shine on an international scale during the month of October. Monseigneur François Lapierre, un grand ami, nous avons travaillé ensemble sur les Journées mondiales de la jeunesse, est né à Bromont, Québec. En 1962, il entreprend des études théologiques au séminaire des missions étrangères à Pont-Viau. En 1965, il est accepté comme membre perpétuel de la Société des missions étrangères et ordonné prêtre cette même année. C'est un prêtre, un évêque du Concile. En 1975, il est incardiné dans le diocèse de Saint-Hyacinthe. Il parle espagnol parfaitement. C'est un grand ami des Américains du Sud. Il a été missionnaire au Pérou, au Guatemala et puis à Honduras. Il a été supérieur général de la Société des missions étrangères, élu évêque du diocèse de Saint-Hyacinthe en 1998 par Jean-Paul II. Monseigneur Lapierre préside différentes instances, notamment la Fondation canadienne de la vie religieuse, de la Conférence des évêques catholiques du Canada et le Comité sur les rapports interculturels et interreligieux de l'Assemblée des évêques catholiques du Québec. À la Conférence des évêques catholiques du Canada, il est délégué de la Commission épiscopale pour l'unité chrétienne, les relations religieuses avec lui, avec les Juifs, le dialogue interreligieux pour participer au dialogue anglican-catholique romain. C'est un expert dans plusieurs domaines et un grand pasteur. Et ce fait d'être pasteur s'est manifesté d'une façon très claire et brillante pendant le synode des évêques en octobre dernier. Bishop Brian Dunn, born in 1955 in St. John's, Newfoundland. Primary and elementary education in Newfoundland. High school. After studying at Memorial University in Newfoundland, he went to King's College in London, Ontario, and received his bachelor's degree in 1976. He completed his seminary formation at St. Peter's Seminary in London, and again it was at St. Peter's that both of us reconnected when both of us were teaching together. Brian came in as a professor of canon law in the years prior to his episcopal appointment. He's a man with broad shoulders in many senses, and he's able to bear huge burdens with such grace and such dignity and such presence. He's been extensively involved in teaching as a lecturer at the Atlantic School of Theology and also at St. Peter's Seminary. He taught at St. Paul's University in the Faculty of Canon Law. In 2005, he was Dean of Studies at St. Peter's Seminary, ordained bishop at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland in 2008. He's been one of the auxiliaries of the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie prior to being named bishop of his present diocese. Nous avons avec nous deux experts du synode et deux grands pasteurs. I invite Bishop Dunn to come forward, first of all, to share with us some of his reflections on the Synod of Bishops and the new evangelization, and particularly the import of that synod in the area of communications. Bishop Dunn.
Thank you very much, Father Tom. Your words are very kind. Thank you very much for being here, for the invitation to be here. I was cajoled to come here. I have some background in parish ministry and all kinds of background in all kinds of other areas, but not in communications. So I don't know how I got here. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be more especially to be able to share my experience at the Synod. The Synod was a very moving experience for me, and so this morning what I would like to do, here's the kind of outline what I'd like to do. First of all, the background to the Synod, very shortly. Some reflections on the theme. Father Tom mentioned the theme there of the new evangelization and transmission of the Christian faith. And then I was asked to look at the personal challenge that I brought to the Synod and that followed up from there. A little bit on the follow-up from the Synod, some of my own personal reflections, and some suggestions in terms of communications. All this in 25 minutes or less. Anyway, what is a synod? The synod is really, the word synod is a very important word for us because it comes from two Greek words that have meaning about coming together and going and moving on a way. And so I'd like to use the idea of a synod as going forward together. Now, I believe that the word synod is really the foundation of all that I say this morning and really all that we need to say in terms of communications. We need to go forward together. The word synod also was used in the Eastern churches, especially for a body of bishops that establishes church law, and also is found in the Western church as a legislative body in a diocese. And so each diocese has the opportunity of having a synod in order to promulgate church law. We're moving in the Diocese of Antigonish to have an assembly as opposed to a synod, but it's basically the same kind of idea of trying to move forward together. The background to the synod. The synod came, it's a new body for us in the Western Church, in the Roman Catholic Church, and it's a new body that was created out of the experience of Vatican II. Paul VI in 1965 promulgated this new institute for the Church, and the purposes of the synod, as you can see on the slide there, first of all promoting a closer union and greater cooperation between the Pope and the bishops of the world. Now this was really really flowing out of the experience of Vatican II. It was a wonderful experience of working together. And so they wanted to have a more permanent experience of that, and that's what the Synod was. And so it was established. Secondly, then, it was seeing to it that accurate and direct information is supplied on matters and situations that bear upon the internal life of the church and upon the kind of action that should be carried out. Now, that's really what happened in this last Synod in October. It was a real time of reflecting on the new experience of the new evangelization, and lastly, facilitating agreement, at least on essential matters of doctrine and courses of action. So that's the purpose of the Synod in 1965. And so the call of the Synod, this latest one, was called then in 2010, and the first document, the kind of an initial document, was sent around in, as you see, February 2011. It's called the Lineamenta, circulated and asked for input. And so this document is really a kind of a draft document that is circulated throughout the whole church and invites input. I circulated a few of the questions. There was probably 100 questions in it. I took 4 of those questions and circulated in my own diocese and asked the people of the diocese, what do you think that I need to say to this synod? And so there was a kind of a real sense of taking the lineamenta of the whole church and using it in my own diocese. And then a year later, all the input that was received on the lineamenta then was formulated into an instrumentum laboris. This is the working document that was circulated just in June of 2012. And this was the basis for any kind of intervention. So all those people that were named by Father Tom there, about the 350 people who were at the Synod, each had to focus on a particular paragraph of this working document. The theme, and we need to really appreciate the theme. The theme has to do with reflecting on the modern world, reflecting on our own experience. And Pope Benedict XVI created something new. And when I really have further time, my focus on the Synod is really the example of Pope Benedict. I believe that, at least from my own personal experience, I saw him really leading in a very specific way and a very creative way. This is one of the elements of his creativity. He created a new pontifical council for culture, or a new pontifical council for new evangelization. And this the creation of that particular dicastery in the Curia was one of the new ways of beginning to have the church respond to this very important topic. That was the first change, generally in terms of a creation of a new dicastery since 1988, since the last document on the Curia. So the theme itself, secularization, he says, which presents itself in culture by imposing a world and humanity without reference to the transcendent, is invading every aspect of daily life and developing a mentality in which God is effectively absent from the human life and human awareness. This secularization is not only an external threat to believers, but has been manifest for some time in the heart of the church itself. And that's what we experienced, and that's what we shared, or at least many times when I heard at the Synod. This is the kind of experience that we heard over and over again, that there's a real secularization seeping not only into the world, but into the church many times. They live in the world and are often marked by it, by the cultural imagery that impresses contradictory and impelling models regarding the practical denial of God. No longer any need for God, to think of God, or to return to God. And so this is the whole sense of secularization. If we think about it from our own experience. So the new evangelization refers to those Christians, those who are Christian in name, who come from Christian backgrounds, are familiar with Christianity, believe they know Christianity, but no longer practice that faith in a meaningful way. Now that applies to almost at least 80% of the church. Not only in Western countries, but all over the world. There's a huge ecclesial issue that we need to address. They've heard of Christ, they've heard of the gospel, even though they may think they know him, know Christ, and understand what these mean. There are many others who have heard the message, but they never heard it presented as good news. They may have heard it as rules or laws or a burden too heavy to bear. And still there are others who have rejected the gospel, walked away from it because it seemed irrelevant or meaningless or having nothing that can touch or change the lives. Now, this is what we're talking. We're talking about the good news that has been somehow or other given to people, and yet they've either rejected it or walked away from it. That's what the new evangelization is. That's what we're talking about. In this working document, the theme was continually reflected upon. And the theme here talks about the silent apostasy, silent apostasy that we experience in the church, paragraph 69. And this is the paragraph that I eventually will focus on. Those who are weakening with a weakening of the faith, a lack of personal involvement or experience in the transmission of the faith, those who have had insufficient spiritual guidance in the process of their formative, intellectual, and professional training. So if we think about for the last 30 years or so, lots of people haven't had the formation either in schools or in the catechetical formation period of their lives to give them what they need to live out their faith in their professional lives. And that includes then the whole area of communication, the media. It refers to the seemingly excessive bureaucratic character of the ecclesiastical structure. So it's not only a weakening of personal faith, but it looks at the structures that we have in our church, perceived as far removed from the average person and one's everyday life, and a loss of enthusiasm for missionary zeal. Now, again, this is a reflection from the working document that describes this silent apostasy, and that is really talking about the experience of lots of people in the church. Goes on to talk about then those who complain of the excessively formal character of liturgical expressions and celebrations, a routine celebration of rituals with a lack of deep spiritual experience, which turn people away instead of attracting them. So there's the whole liturgical experience for many, many people. And then finally then it refers to the counter-witness of some of the church's members, the infidelity in one's vocation, scandals, the little sensitivity to the problems of everyday people and the world itself, and acknowledges that this mystery of sin is within the church itself. And so we need to recognize that the new evangelization then is not something, it's a term that John Paul II used beginning in 1983 and continued to use throughout his pontificate, throughout Benedict, and now with Pope Francis. It's new in its ardor, methods, and expression. So it's not new in terms of its content. We don't have new content. We haven't had a new revelation from the Lord. We now have a call to look at the thrust, the inner thrust of this. What do we believe? What do we believe about Jesus, and how do we live that out in our lives? So new in its methods that must correspond to the times, and new because it is necessary to proclaim the gospel to those who have already heard it. And that's the new thing about evangelization. So the new evangelization deals with three groups of people. First of all, when we think about evangelization, we think about those who have never heard of Christ. Well, that's not quite the new evangelization. New evangelization is really the daily work of the church. How do we continue to allow the Spirit of the Lord, as that opening reading says, the Spirit of the Lord to move within us and give us an inner thrust? And then thirdly, reaching out to those who are already Christian, and that's the new thing. It's already Christian, but have lost some sense of the attraction of the good news. And so the personal challenge that I had, I arrived in Antigonish 3.5 years ago, and I arrived there in the midst of a class action settlement where we had 130 charges there, as well as the bishop who had been charged with use of child pornography. And so this caused a huge, as you might expect, in terms of the diocese. It was a very difficult time for them, and not only is, it's continuing there. And so when I was called to be a delegate to the synod, my thought was, what do I need to say? And so as a result of hearing from the diocese then, I focused on this issue. The new evangelization must also speak concretely to the great difficulties and challenges, the pain and the suffering of our brothers and sisters who have experienced through the scourge of sexual abuse by members of the clergy. The painful reality has affected people's perception of the church, perception of the world, and their own believing in God. People experience a significant disorientation And so this is the quote there, leading to forms of distrust of the teaching and the values that are essential for followers. So in other words, this experience of sexual abuse affects not only those who are sexually abused, but it begins to eat away at the trust that everybody has about the clergy in the church. So how do we evangelize? How do we bring new life? And how do we have an interior thrust to the belief in the good news by those who have been deeply hurt? And we might add, not only deeply hurt by this issue of sexual abuse, but any experience of being deeply hurt. An approach to this question involves seeing and experiencing and appreciating how Jesus dealt with those who were disillusioned as he walked with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. For me, in a personal way, this is the gospel passage for new evangelization. You have two disciples who are absolutely disillusioned. They're distraught. Whatever they believed about Jesus, they've set it aside. They're very disillusioned. And so Jesus walks with them. He walks with them. And I believe that's the image for the new evangelization. That's an image for communications. That's the image for communications and new evangelization together. He attentively listened to the stories of the disciples, and his profound attention allowed them to share the things that troubled them deeply. So in other words, his attention, his presence was enough for them to share what troubled them. He eventually led them through the reflection on the scriptures to a new awareness and an encounter with his presence, as they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. So the listening led to a very deep encounter with the Lord, and especially as they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. The example of Jesus then shows that the new evangelization, which must happen in the midst of the sexual abuse crisis for my own diocese and for many dioceses throughout Canada, it occurs in at least 4 different ways. And this is basically some of the talk that I gave at the synod itself. I had 5 minutes to talk. At least here I got a little bit more, not much more, but a little bit more. So there are 4 different things about that. First of all, that there's a real listening necessary, a real desire, and I'll look at each one of these separately. First of all, careful listening. We need to provide real opportunities of listening and discerning together to appreciate the depth of hurt, anger, disillusionment associated with this scandal, and not only with this scandal, whatever is causing us concern in our life of the church today. We need to acknowledge the devastating effects of sexual abuse upon our Catholic communities, listening attentively to the victims and the survivors of sexual abuse. Just the listening itself, just taking the time to listen, is a huge aspect of this new evangelization. How do we have a listening church? Be ready to apologize for the harm, and this really needs to be done not only for actions that were done that caused hurt, but also for the inadequate ways of addressing it. And that's come up as almost as an after reflection of this whole experience within the whole church today. And the need for, in the diocesan level or parish level, of having some kind of an office where people could bring their hurts and to receive the reconciliation that they need and know that they're listened to. Secondly, to look at the reasons. What are the reasons behind this scandal? Why did it happen? And we need to have this proper diagnosis. Sister Nuala Kenny, who's really been working quite a bit on this whole issue, talks about proper diagnosis is absolutely essential in order to have the proper addressing of the issue. Creating safe environments. This is one of the things that the Holy See has called for, and how many of our dioceses here in Canada have responded to that. Church leaders need to make an extra effort to develop a real living relationship with Jesus Christ ourselves. And this is one of the things that came out of the synod. The many of the cardinals and the bishops who spoke, there were times in the evening. This was a sense of saying, for the new evangelization, first and foremost needs to deal with the leaders of the church. So we need to have this personal and living relationship with Jesus so that we can witness to others. And that witness then becomes passed on to others. Those preparing for liturgy, for leadership as well, need to acquire the strong sense of being leaders who serve, not privileged, who serve. So the third thing then is meaningful consultation. Now I'm I'm absolutely convinced that this is, if we do this, this is an aspect of the Church of the Vatican II. Vatican II talked about consultation, and not only talked about it, but created vehicles in parish, diocese, and in the whole church of ways of we can consult. And consult doesn't mean thank you very much for your thought, I'm going to go my own way. Consultation has a technical meaning in the church whereby we really listen to what's happening, we discuss it out, we work together and come up with some kind of consensus, and then we move with that consensus. And so it doesn't mean the superior or the leader or whatever listens to a crowd that need to say a few things. It means really working together and coming up with a way of allowing the Spirit to move. And so this is a very important aspect. Consultation, the third point there, consultation is a process of dialogue that involves bringing people together, a way of acknowledging the presence of God's Spirit working in the members of the community. One of the things I do in my own diocese, I attend lots and lots and lots of meetings. And one of the things that I've come to realize how important these meetings are for the movement of God's Spirit. If we can sit down, and I go to meetings sometimes and say, I don't know how we're going to deal with this question. We sit down, we talk about it, and get some ideas, and then all of a sudden something gets inserted in the dialogue. And it's absolutely amazing that this works. And so I think this is really a very important element, bringing new life to all councils, and also the last line, giving voice to those who feel that their voice is never heard. So this can happen on a parish level, a diocesan level, the whole Canadian church, and the whole church. The Synod is a consultative body in the church. Third thing now, or fourth thing, and this is the thing I think that most people have heard about. Those who have been hurt by the church then call for real change in the structures and real change in the mentality, the attitude, and the heart that is necessary with working together, working with clergy, between clergy and laity. Our Holy Father Pope Benedict in 2012 talked about this word co-responsible. It's a real sense of not only I got to do something for the pastor, or got to do something for the bishop or for the pope or whoever we're doing it for. We need to do it because we're working together. We're responsible together. And this co-responsibility is really the heart of how do we work together in terms of lay involvement. And so it talks about some attitudes that need changing. Lay involvement here needs to deal with the appointment of pastoral teams that consist of both clergy and laity in terms of looking after the faith life of communities. A real reflection on lay ecclesial ministers. This is a very important. There's lots of, we might say, developments that are already found in our church teaching, in the Code of Canon Law, that we can move forward, and we haven't been moving forward. And I think this is the thing that we need to do. And a deliberate and a systematic involvement and leadership of women at all levels of the church life. And John Paul II talked about so that the experience, the feminine genius that is experienced by women can be a part of the whole church. Permitting women to be instituted as lectors and acolytes. One of the things that we have now in the new liturgy, we have lots of things that are concern for people, but if we really looked at how lay people are involved in the instituted ministries of the church, this could be a wonderful way for us to institute the laity involved in liturgical ministry, and the institution of a ministry of catechists in terms of an agent of new evangelization. So that was my presentation, as I said, at the synod itself. Let's move on. And as I said, from my experience, one of the things that really touched me most was the example of Benedict. And he had a wonderful little homily on the first morning of the synod, where he talked about evangelization. Evangelization is really the announcement of the victory and the joy and the goodness that happens because of the victory over enemy. And so that's really the joy that we have in Jesus, who has come among us and has been victorious over sin and death. His final homily as well was on the Gospel of Bartimaeus, being able to see and have a see in a new way and have that encounter with the Lord who can open our eyes. I'm conscious of our time here. Message of the... and so the follow-up then of the Synod, it took place in a number of different ways. First of all was some propositions. So the whole Synod gave 58 propositions to the Pope to use as a foundation for writing a Synod document. But also from the Synod itself, we had the message of the Synod. This is the document that came out of the Synod. Now, this is a beautiful document. If you want one thing to read about the Synod, this is the document. It's called the Message of the Synod. And it uses the example of the reflection on Jesus' encounter with the Samaritan woman. And it talks about there's no man or woman in one's life would not find oneself beside a well with an empty bucket, with the hope of finding the fulfillment of the heart's most profound desire that can alone give full meaning to life. And so it's a sense of the yearning for meaning that we all have, and how Jesus walks there, gives us what we need, and really invites us to an encounter. And so, as I said, that's a beautiful meditation. Beautiful meditation. And then the same thing that this message is as well. Proposition. So we had only one proposition, but I think is an important proposition in terms of social communications. It says the use of means of social communication has been an important role to play, etc. In this field, especially in the world of electronic communications, it is necessary that convinced Christians be formed, prepared, and made capable to transmit faithfully the content of the faith and Christian morality. The most important form of this communication of the faith remains the sharing of the testimony of life, without which none of the media efforts will result in an effective transmission of the gospel. So it has to do with witness. As you recall, one of the famous lines from the document on Paul VI, when he talked about evangelization, was the importance of witnessing. And teachers may be heard only because they're witnesses. And so witnessing is really the heart of the new evangelization. Some of my own reflections, just 4 things. First of all, I thought that this was really the Western Church, the Europe and North America issue. But as I heard so many from other continents and even the Philippines, Africa, I heard people walking away from church as well. So this is not just ours in the sense of this North America, but this is an issue of the whole church. Secondly, was this issue Father Tom mentioned about the presence of fraternal delegates, of people who were representing other denominations, other ecclesial communities, and the whole sense that the spiritual ecumenism, or the unity that can happen when all of us who are Christians work together to bring the gospel to all people, can be a wonderful commitment to unity as well. Third thing then is that new evangelization was recognized not just as a program for the moment, but a way of looking at the future of the church and seeing all of us engaged in inviting, first of all, ourselves to a renewal of faith, and then all of us around to the joyful acceptance of the risen Lord. Final reflection that I have has to do with the sense of new Pentecost. I had a sense here, all these people were speaking in their own language about the good news that Jesus was doing in their lives in the 5 continents, in the whole world. And I had a sense that the Spirit was very, very present at that. And so it was a new Pentecost. There was the singing of the Veni Creator Spiritus at various moments, but it was a real moving experience of the Holy Spirit who was present. And so just close off with a couple of suggestions here in terms of media. As I said, this is not my expertise, but I believe this is certainly my experience. There's an overt opposition to Christianity by the mass media. Let me just say something. The mass media is effective in fostering enormous sympathy for beliefs and practices that are at odds with the gospel. For example, abortion, homosexual lifestyle, euthanasia, and whatever other issues that are there. But it's amazing how, for instance, the national radio or TV can continually give the interview with Morgenthaler. I heard it over the last maybe year or so, 5 or 6 different times. I thought to myself, this is amazing that this is put there. But it's the agenda of the mass media. When religious voices are raised in opposition to these positions, the mass media can target religion, labeling it as ideological and insensitive in regard to people's needs. Secondly, the sympathy for anti-Christian lifestyle choices. And here's the thing that really is with us. And the sympathy for anti-Christian lifestyle choices that the mass media fosters is ingrained in the public. So that when people hear the Christian message, it often sounds ideological and emotionally cruel by contrast to the ostensible humaneness of the anti-Christian perspective. Catholics who stand against, for instance, the legalization of abortion or the redefinition of marriage are portrayed as being driven or severe and uncaring, not because of something that they say or do, but because their audience contrasts that message with the sympathetic and caring tones of the media-produced images of human beings. So take that example of the alternative families of same-sex couples with adopted children. There's a whole, the TV is filled with these, and as well as our media. The context of evangelization in a world dominated by media. We need to be more informed about the context of evangelization, and so we need to really have a real sense of what are we doing in terms of being newly evangelized and bringing that to the world of media. Magisterial teaching can be helpful, but it also needs some further development in terms of our own understanding, our own appreciation of some of the nuances there. Modern media can distort reality by telling us what to think and what to think about. The inclusion and exclusion of topics considered worthy of coverage by the mass media is one of the most subtle devices employed for forming people's ethical imagination. So what the media decides that they're going to report on, whether it's euthanasia here or abortion or whatever, then that becomes the issue that people hear. And so that's the formation that is happening through our media. So evangelization in the modern world must find the whole experience of this and must be able to deal with this. We also need to appreciate both benefits and the challenges. Benefits, lots of access to information, and the Benedict's talk in terms of the Social Communication Day in January dealt with some of these aspects. The benefits on the one hand, and yet that we need to be aware that there's some dangers. That there's a sense of self-centeredness, attention in terms of individual needs only, an exaltation in terms of emotion in relationship, the loss of objective value of true human experiences such as meditation and silence. Support for those who are involved in this ministry. The church personnel require a real grasp of the impact that which this new evangelization technology need to have on the individuals and society. And so these personnel, yourselves, need to know not only and minister to those who are information rich, but also those who are information poor. They need to know how to invite others into the dialogue. Avoiding any style of communicating which suggests domination or manipulation or personal gain. This document there, it's an instruction in 1992, a beautiful instruction on communications. I was quite struck with it. Maybe you're very familiar with it, but as well, in terms of communications personnel, the church has to develop a responsibility to offer programs of pastoral care to yourselves, to be responding to the conditions that you have and to provide whatever formation that you need in terms of your own personal work and personal lives. Communication plans, then, are only one dimension of a whole pastoral plan for adults or for a diocese or a parish that involves liturgical formation as well as certain action for charity and justice. So in other words, it's not how do we celebrate our relationship and how do we reach out to others as a result of that relationship. Our profound respect and listening to adults is the foundation of any media response. So this whole listening that is part of new evangelization is essential to the media as well. Our listening involves taking account of their problems and their experiences, their spiritual and cultural resources, with full respect for their differences. So that's a very important aspect of, how do we deal with those who are having difficulty living out the life of faith. And finally, then, the whole issue of communications involves pastoral care, the importance of witnessing again. The whole witness of The witness of our lives is more eloquent than our words or proclamations as we express who we are. In the digital arena, the Pope suggests that our willingness to engage patiently and respectfully with questions and doubts of those we encounter in the networks can be a powerful expression of our care for them. Notwithstanding the challenges we should always be hopeful. And then finally, it's the environment. The digital environment is the existential environment where people live and move. It's the place where the church should be present and where believers, if they are to be authentic in their presence, will seek to share with others the deepest joy and hope of Jesus. And so it's a real sense that the church needs to be with you, and we need to work together in terms of a dialogue so that people have a new sense of the Lord Jesus. Thank you very much.
Monseigneur Lapierre.
Chers amis, je voudrais d'abord remercier le Père Rosica pour sa présentation. Vous savez, le Père Rosica, j'admire beaucoup sa passion pour communiquer l'Évangile aujourd'hui. Et un peu comme Dieu, il est un peu partout. On va à Rome, il est là, on vient ici. Alors c'est magnifique. Vous êtes vraiment un témoin de la nouvelle évangélisation pour moi. Alors c'est une joie ce matin d'être ici avec vous. Et je ne parlerai pas trop longtemps parce que mon auto est stationnée dans un endroit où je dois l'enlever dans moins de 20 minutes. C'est comme ça. Alors déjà, mon ami Brian a parlé, je dis mon ami parce que vous savez, nous ne nous connaissions pas beaucoup avant le synode, mais nous avons habité ensemble, nous avons vécu ensemble pendant 3 semaines et je crois que je peux dire qu'on est devenus des amis. C'est déjà un bon effet du synode. Alors qu'on oublie parfois, parce que le synode, ce n'est pas simplement des communications, des idées, mais c'est aussi des personnes. Et vous savez, dans la salle du synode, on n'est pas assis n'importe où. On est assis à l'endroit où il y a tout un plan, voilà. Et alors, on doit s'asseoir à cet endroit-là. Et comme je suis un peu providentialiste, je me disais, qui seront les gens assis à côté de moi? Eh bien, d'un côté, il y avait Monseigneur Tiana, qui est évêque de Kiasso, au Mali. Et je suis en communication avec lui depuis le synode, parce qu'on sait qu'au Mali, actuellement, se vit une situation très difficile. Et j'avais, de l'autre côté, Monseigneur Launay, qui est évêque de Jacmel, en Haïti. Alors, il est venu me voir pour me présenter un projet d'un centre de 350 000 $. Alors, vous savez, je dis ça parce qu'il y a des gens qui m'ont dit, mais le synode, qu'est-ce que ça donne? Bien, ça donne pas grand-chose peut-être, mais ça peut enlever quelque chose. Parce qu'il ne suffit pas simplement de donner, il faut aussi enlever des choses. Puis, voilà, je pense que Brian a bien expliqué. la réalité du synode, qui est une façon concrète de vivre aujourd'hui la collégialité épiscopale. On sait qu'au Concile Vatican II, toute cette question de la collégialité a été une des questions les plus source de tension. Source de tension et une question très importante pour l'Église. Nous étions, on l'a dit, plusieurs évêques et qui venaient de 114 conférences épiscopales à travers le monde. Alors, j'aimerais d'abord dire un point durant le synode qui a attiré mon attention d'une façon spéciale. Vous savez, comme Brian l'a dit, nous avions 5 minutes pour intervenir et pendant pratiquement 15 jours, on a entendu des évêques. Puis aussi, il y avait des observateurs. Il y avait des observateurs qui sont intervenus. Il y avait un jeune catéchète du diocèse de Rome qui est intervenu, un des derniers, et qui a dit au début de son intervention, « Ça fait déjà 2 semaines que j'entends des évêques me dire qu'est-ce que les laïcs doivent faire. Alors permettez à un jeune laïc de dire aux évêques ce qu'il pourrait faire. » Bon, voilà. Alors, pour vous dire qu'on a entendu un peu toutes sortes de perspectives et d'interventions. Mais une intervention qui m'a interpellé, c'est une intervention de Monseigneur Bruno Forte, qui est un évêque, un archevêque italien, qui est un grand théologien. Alors, quand il a parlé, bien, on avait l'impression que les gens l'écoutaient plus que d'autres qui étaient moins grands théologiens. Alors, Monseigneur Bruno Forte a dit, parce qu'une des questions qui a été posée durant le synode, on parle de nouvelle évangélisation. Mais plusieurs ont posé la question, mais quelle est la nouveauté de cette évangélisation? Qu'est-ce qui est nouveau? Alors, on sait que déjà le pape Jean-Paul II avait dit cette évangélisation, elle est nouvelle, d'une part, elle devrait être nouvelle par l'ardeur, par le langage, par les méthodes. Alors, il y avait beaucoup déjà de matériel qui avait traité de cette nouveauté. Monseigneur Bruno Forte a dit, alors, cette évangélisation, elle est nouvelle et cette nouveauté, elle est eschatologique. Personne n'a trouvé rien à dire là-dessus. Je suis allé voir Monseigneur Forte après et je lui ai dit, j'ai dit, vous m'excuserez, j'ai pas étudié la théologie. Tantôt, on a mentionné que j'avais étudié à Pontvio, mais j'ai pas étudié après ça. Alors, j'ai dit, quand vous avez dit c'est une nouveauté eschatologique, je dois avouer que je ne sais pas exactement qu'est-ce que vous vouliez dire. Et je ne vous cache pas qu'au début, en parlant avec lui, j'avais l'impression que lui non plus ne savait pas trop. Alors, et finalement, il m'a dit, écoutez, c'est la nouveauté, un peu comme on trouve dans Ézéchiel, au chapitre 36 d'Ézéchiel, lorsqu'il est dit, je vous donnerai un cœur nouveau, un esprit nouveau. C'est l'expérience d'une nouvelle humanité. Je vous donnerai un cœur nouveau, un esprit nouveau. On sait que ces paroles sont déjà chez le prophète Ézéchiel, elles sont aussi chez le prophète Jérémie. Et alors, je ne vous cache pas que ça m'a inspiré. Je me suis dit, bon, voilà une réalité importante. Et ce matin, à la prière de l'Aude, nous avions le psaume 97, où il était dit, nous allons chanter au Seigneur un chant nouveau. Alors, je ne vous cache pas, je suis allé voir dans la Bible de Jérusalem, on ne disait rien sur le chant nouveau. Mais dans la Tobe, on disait que alors, le chant nouveau, ce psaume est dans un contexte de fin d'exil, lorsque le peuple de Dieu revient d'exil. et que, alors, ce chant nouveau, nous allons chanter au Seigneur un chant nouveau, c'est le signe que l'avenir est possible. Que l'avenir est possible. C'est un cri d'espérance. Et moi, je crois que la nouveauté, alors, elle est là. Elle est là. Elle est dans ce chant nouveau. Et moi, c'est ce que j'ai senti au synode, que alors nous commencions à chanter un chant nouveau. Mais vous savez, quand on commence à pratiquer un chant nouveau, souvent on fausse un peu. Hein? C'est normal. Et alors, nous, petit à petit, alors nous trouvons comment chanter ce chant aujourd'hui. Alors, tout ça pour dire que donc cette dimension eschatologique, elle est certainement importante. C'est l'avenir qui est possible. Et je crois que cette expression, alors qui était déjà présente dans l'esprit du bienheureux pape Jean XXIII lorsqu'il a convoqué le concile. Quand on lit la bulle de convocation du concile Vatican II, le 25 décembre 1961, ça m'impressionne, moi, de penser que le pape, le jour de Noël, eh bien, il ne faisait pas juste recevoir des cadeaux, mais il écrivait une bulle. Hein? Il n'était pas uniquement dans sa bulle. Là. Alors, il en écrivait une. Et alors, dans cette bulle de convocation, il dit, le but du concile, c'est de verser dans les veines de l'humanité la sève de l'Évangile. Alors, vous voyez, déjà, alors qu'il avait cette vision de cette nouvelle évangélisation. Alors, devant ce nouveau chant que nous sommes appelés à chanter, parce que, vous savez, moi, je suis d'une famille où on chante en famille, encore aujourd'hui. On a des pratiques régulièrement. Et alors, et des fois, on apprend des chants nouveaux. Eh bien, c'est un apprentissage que l'Église a à faire aujourd'hui. Nous sommes engagés dans cet apprentissage. On a demandé, dans le mot qu'on m'a fait parvenir, quels sont les obstacles? Quels sont les obstacles que la société dans laquelle nous vivons présente pour ce chant nouveau? Eh bien, déjà, Brian y a fait référence. Vous savez, il y a eu, en préparation pour ce synode, ce qu'on appelle les lineamenta. C'est un document, un premier document qui était excellent. Dans ce document, il y avait 5 scénarios qu'on voyait comme faisant une synthèse de la réalité actuelle dans laquelle nous vivons. Et le premier scénario traitait de la sécularisation. Il y a eu, alors, en relation avec ces lineamenta, et comme Monseigneur Brian l'a dit, il y a eu une réaction des églises locales. Alors nous, dans le diocèse, nous avons eu une vaste opération pour justement voir comment était la réaction à ces lineamenta. Et à partir de cela, alors on a eu l'instrumentum laboris. 2 documents excellents qui sont des documents, je crois, à consulter et à lire. Et c'est très intéressant de voir que sur la réalité de la sécularisation, eh bien, si vous regardez la différence entre les lineamenta et l'instrumentum laboris, on voit qu'il y a une progression importante dans la réflexion. Dans les lineamenta, on fait ressortir surtout les aspects plutôt, je dirais, négatifs de la sécularisation. Bon, je n'entrerai pas, il y en a peut-être parmi vous qui ont lu le fameux livre de Charles Taylor, The Secular Age. Hein? C'est un livre très intéressant qui défait un peu certains lieux communs sur la réalité de la sécularisation. Alors, et au numéro 53 de l'Instrumentum Laboris, on dit la sécularisation peut conduire à une mentalité hédoniste. Bon, qu'est-ce que c'est exactement une mentalité hédoniste? Là aussi, il faudrait que je consulte Monseigneur Forté. Alors, une mentalité consumériste qui pousse vers des façons très superficielles d'affronter la vie et les responsabilités. Hein? Alors donc, il y a, on ne peut pas le nier, dans notre culture, une tendance à cette superficialité dans la façon d'aborder les réalités et les responsabilités. Mais c'est intéressant de voir que l'Instrumentum Laboris, au numéro 54, dit « Mais on affirme par ailleurs que ce risque ne doit pas faire perdre de vue tout le positif que le christianisme a appris de la confrontation avec la sécularisation. Le séculum, le séculier, hein, parce que, vous savez, au synode, il y avait aussi du latin. Hein? Il y avait du latin et on s'est rendu compte que le latin était vraiment une langue universelle, universellement inconnue. Vous savez, même les présidents, surtout le président, le cardinal de Hong Kong, avait beaucoup de difficultés avec son latin. Son latin était avec un fort accent chinois. Alors, le séculum, dans lequel vivent les croyants et les non-croyants, a quelque chose qui les rapproche. Et quelle est cette réalité qui rapproche les croyants et les non-croyants? Quelle est cette réalité? C'est très intéressant de voir que ce que dit l'Instrumentum Laboris, il dit, c'est l'humain, c'est l'humain, c'est la réalité humaine. Et c'est peut-être là un aspect très positif de notre temps, cette importance donnée à la réalité humaine. Et alors on ajoute, et c'est justement cet élément de l'humain, point naturel d'intersection de la foi, qui peut devenir le lieu privilégié de l'évangélisation. Donc la très grande importance entre l'humain et l'évangélisation. Et durant le synode, comme on l'a mentionné tantôt, le synode, vous savez, a été un moment très important au plan écuménique. Alors, il y a eu des invités écuméniques. La maison où nous vivions, nous avions avec nous des invités écuméniques qui venaient, alors il y en avait qui venaient de la Finlande, d'autres qui venaient de la Russie, d'autres venaient d'un peu partout. Alors, un de ces invités écuméniques importants a été l'archevêque de Canterbury, celui qui était archevêque de Canterbury jusqu'à décembre, Monseigneur Owen Williams. Pour moi, à mon opinion, il a fait une des meilleures interventions dans l'Assemblée, je crois, dans le synode. Et je me permets de m'inspirer, ce serait trop long, son texte est à lire. Alors si vous avez l'occasion de retrouver ce texte, je crois qu'il est très lumineux. Ce qui montre la grande importance de l'écuménisme aujourd'hui, l'importance de travailler avec tous les chrétiens et chrétiennes alors, à travers le monde. Alors il a dit, l'un des aspects les plus importants de la théologie de Vatican II a été le renouveau de l'anthropologie chrétienne. Alors, on l'oublie parfois, l'importance de l'anthropologie chrétienne, surtout dans la Gaudium et Spes, toute la première partie de la Gaudium et Spes, c'est sur l'anthropologie chrétienne. Dans cette perspective, proclamer l'Évangile, c'est proclamer qu'il est enfin possible, a-t-il dit, d'être complètement humain. La foi catholique et chrétienne est un vrai humanisme. Et là, il a cité le grand philosophe français Jacques Maritain. L'humanisme intégral. C'est une expression magnifique, l'humanisme intégral. même nous, les chrétiens, les catholiques, je dirais, on a parfois oublié que cette humanité est au cœur de la foi. Alors, là, il a cité après le père de Lubac, un autre grand théologien, on le sait, qui dit, il ne s'agit pas, le père de Lubac, qui dit, il ne s'agit pas de remplacer la tâche évangélisatrice par une campagne d'humanisation. Alors, la question, c'est, pense-t-on que le christianisme a une valeur humanisante? Je me souviens, moi, quand on a mentionné tantôt que j'avais été missionnaire au Pérou. Quand je suis arrivé au Pérou, dans les années 60, alors ça vous donne une idée de la vétusté de mon être. Alors, quand je suis arrivé au Pérou dans les années 60, eh bien, il y avait une tendance à dire, avant d'annoncer l'Évangile, il faut donner à manger. Il faut donner à manger avant d'annoncer l'Évangile. Quand je suis revenu ici, il y a des gens qui m'ont dit, ici, les gens mangent trop. Ils ne sont pas prêts à recevoir l'Évangile. Il faut qu'ils commencent par maigrir. Ah. Alors, vous voyez, quand on oppose un peu humanisation et évangélisation, bien, il n'est jamais temps, finalement, pour annoncer l'Évangile. Ah. Il n'est jamais temps pour annoncer l'Évangile. Alors, c'est l'évangélisation elle-même qui est source d'humanisation. Le fait d'être pleinement humain signifie un être recréé à l'image de l'humanité du Christ. Et ça, je vous dirais que dans l'expérience qui est la mienne, je m'aperçois qu'aujourd'hui, bien des personnes découvrent que la rencontre du Christ est source d'humanisation. Le Christ, on le sait, le Fils éternel, expression du Père éternel, c'est ce mystère ineffable, alors est source d'humanisation. Lorsque, au début de la célébration de l'Eucharistie, nous disons au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, ce mystère trinitaire vient comme au secours de notre humanité fragile. Alors donc, il y aurait beaucoup à dire sur toute cette réalité, mais voir que l'annonce du Christ, donc, est source d'une plus grande humanisation. Vous voyez, bon, je vois que le temps passe et je risque d'avoir une contravention. Oui. Ben, ça fait rien. La nouvelle évangélisation vaut bien une contravention. Ouais. C'est une bonne idée. On fera une quête. Alors, écoutez, ça, c'est une lettre. Vous savez, chaque fin de semaine, moi, c'est mon travail de fin de semaine, les confirmations, les jeunes écrivent des lettres. Bon, je vous lis la lettre, je ne vous lirai pas toute la lettre parce que ce serait trop long, mais je vous lis simplement un passage. C'est un jeune qui est proche de la vingtaine, qui a écrit « J'ai appris que Jésus, il a vécu une participation à la guignolée, en faisant du bénévolat. J'ai appris que Jésus est comme une chandelle dans ma vie. Il suffit juste d'une parcelle de feu pour rallumer la foi qui nous habite, écrit-il. Bon. J'ai aussi beaucoup aimé apprendre de Jésus comment aider son prochain. Bon, pour moi, la confirmation est une étape merveilleuse dans la vie, car c'est un moment où on entre dans la grande famille qu'est l'Église. Et voyez-vous, dans mon parcours, le moment qui m'a le plus touché est celui où j'ai entendu l'appel pour devenir missionnaire. Vous voyez? Alors, on voit comment les gens qui vivent aujourd'hui l'expérience de l'Évangile, de l'évangélisation, alors comment ils découvrent cette humanité nouvelle dans le Christ. Alors, on le voit, le fait d'être converti à la foi ne signifie pas simplement acquérir un nouveau code de croyance, mais devenir une personne nouvelle, une personne de communion avec Dieu et avec les autres. Alors, il y aurait beaucoup à dire sur toute cette réalité, mais je vois que le temps passe. Alors, j'aimerais simplement dire que ce que je crois à la suite du synode, et le synode m'a aidé à le découvrir, c'est que, comme beaucoup le disent aujourd'hui, nous vivons une époque où, comme le dit Charles Taylor, il dit il y a aujourd'hui moins de dwellers et plus de seekers. Hein? Et il y a plus de gens qui sont en recherche et moins de gens qui ont une identité établie. Nous vivons, plusieurs le disent, autant des identités faibles. Hein? Alors, il ne faut pas se surprendre des fois que les gens soient un peu troublés ou même mélangés. Il y a une recherche. Et en d'autres termes, par exemple, Daniel Hervieux-Légère, dans son livre sur pèlerins et convertis, elle dit aujourd'hui, nous vivons plus avec des pèlerins qu'avec des pratiquants. Hein? Ça, c'est une des réalités qui est très présente dans notre Église. Le problème, c'est que notre Église, elle est encore bien plus organisée pour les pratiquants que pour les pèlerins. Et alors, il y aurait beaucoup à dire sur cette question. Alors, j'ai vu que on a fait noter qu'il y a dans les propositions du synode seulement un numéro sur les communications sociales, le numéro 18. Mais je dirais, ce n'est pas simplement pour venir à la défense du synode, mais je crois qu'il y a plus que le numéro 18 pour les communications sociales dans le synode. Et tantôt, Monseigneur Brian l'a mentionné, personnellement, moi, j'ai été absolument impressionné par le fait qu'on choisisse l'évangile de la rencontre entre Jésus et la Samaritaine comme évangile qui exprime la réalité de la nouvelle évangélisation. Je ne vous cache pas, moi, que depuis le synode, j'ai repris cet évangile et j'ai découvert que pratiquement chaque mot dans cet évangile nous parle de nouvelle évangélisation. D'abord, il est intéressant de voir qu'il nous est dit dans l'Évangile, il fallait que Jésus passe par la Samarie. Or, je lisais dans un commentaire que, en fait, Jésus n'était pas du tout obligé de passer par la Samarie. Hein? Qu'au plan géographique, il n'y avait aucune obligation de passer par la Samarie. Ce « il fallait » montre la vocation de communion, la vocation de rassemblement de l'humanité que Jésus vit. Et on sait que les Samaritains étaient divisés. Alors, toutes ces divisions, alors on voit comment, alors dès le point de départ, il y a ce grand projet de Dieu. Et ensuite de ça, c'était intéressant de voir que cette Samaritaine, elle n'était pas intéressée à rencontrer Jésus, comme beaucoup de gens aujourd'hui. Elle n'était pas intéressée à rencontrer Jésus, mais elle vivait avec, dans son humanité, une très grande soif. Elle avait une très grande soif. Déjà, elle avait eu 5 maris et ce n'était pas encore suffisant. Alors, elle avait donc une grande soif et Jésus la rejoint au niveau de son humanité. Alors, je crois qu'il y a là, pour les communications sociales, moi aussi, je ne connais pas, même si je m'occupe de la vidéo religieuse, hein, je vais vous dire que je ne connais pas beaucoup la réalité des communications sociales, pas assez. Hein, mais je crois personnellement que tout ce qui se fait dans le sens de la profondeur, dans le sens d'une humanisation, et alors devrait se faire aussi dans le sens de l'évangélisation. Moi, je crois que nous savons tous les grands défis, les immenses défis qu'il y a aujourd'hui dans le monde. Et alors, c'est évident que les communications sociales sont très importantes. Un des points, j'avais préparé la liste des points qui me sont apparus les plus importants au synode, mais j'aimerais en mentionner seulement un en terminant, c'est l'importance de l'expérience spirituelle. Beaucoup ont mentionné l'importance de la première annonce de l'Évangile, qui est un grand défi. Et là, je crois que les communications sociales peuvent jouer un très grand rôle. Je rencontre régulièrement des gens qui me disent on est venu pour vivre cette confirmation, on est venu pour demander le baptême parce qu'on a vu sur Internet ou on a vu à la télévision une émission qui nous a touchés, qui nous a... Alors je crois qu'au niveau de la première annonce, les communications sociales peuvent jouer un très grand rôle pour éveiller, pour allumer la flamme de la foi. Alors, donc, je pense que même s'il y a seulement un numéro sur les communications sociales, toute cette réalité de la nouvelle évangélisation touche de très près ces communications. Alors, je souhaite que ce colloque puisse nous aider, tous et toutes, à découvrir toujours plus l'importance de cette nouvelle annonce de l'Évangile aujourd'hui. Merci.
Je pourrais dire que cette belle présentation était eschatologie réalisée. J'ai découvert quelque chose dans sa présentation parce que moi, je vivais dans la même maison de Bruno Forte. On était à table souvent le soir. Et puis il m'a demandé un soir, mais vos évêques, ils ne comprennent pas qu'est-ce que ça veut dire l'eschatologie. Puis je l'ai regardé, je dis, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire ça? Puis il m'a raconté, je dis, Monseigneur, moi non plus, je ne comprends rien. Puis tout de suite, elle a changé le discours à la beauté, parce que c'est un spécialiste de beauté théologique, Monseigneur Forte, qui est un bon théologien. Nous avons 15 minutes pour les questions. Je vous prie de vous identifier et puis de vous adresser à Monseigneur tel ou à un autre, ou bien aux deux, et puis répéter la question bien pour qu'on puisse comprendre. So identify yourselves and also the person to whom you're asking the question. Yes.
I have a question for Bishop Dunn. My name is Kim Walsh. I'm from the Diocese of Alexandria-Cornwall, so I'm not unfamiliar with sex abuse scandals. And my question to you is, I know you haven't been in Antigonish that long, but I look at our priests in our diocese, very affected by all of this. Nearly every single one of them at some point was named in the media as somebody who potentially was an abuser. And I really came in more at the end of all of this. And I wonder, like, how do you motivate the priests and get them to sort of find the joy they maybe had years ago before all of this and when they first became priests, and motivate them to this whole new evangelization, and as opposed to just, I'll open my doors on Sunday and see who comes in.
Thank you very much. It's a very important question because the reality of the priests was also marked by this whole scandal as well. In Antigonish, we had some people come from Southdown and did a workshop, and then they came back just recently. We've worked at it a number of places in terms of study. And so it's a matter of trying to be with, be with the priests. And so priests being with one another to be able to at least begin to articulate how it's affected them, but also not just to be caught up in the quagmire, but to continue to move forward. And moving forward had to do with realizing that they still have support of other priests, and also lots of support from people. People in the parish have been supportive of them. So the working together is really the way that we have moved forward. But in terms of experiencing the joy of priesthood that they had when they got ordained, it's not there yet. and it's a ways to go, because it's not only the scandal now that has happened, but also the hurt that people experienced also lashed out against the priest as well. And so it's just a whole it's a whole experience of a community being hurt. And so how do we be patient with one another? How do we move forward together? It's a huge thing of listening. And that's part of the reason why we have this synod or this congress on the go in the diocese, is so that we can listen together and try to say we're committed to at least these 2 or 3 areas of a pastoral plan for the next little while. And part of that would be dealing with the hurt that is there, you know. So thank you.
Next question, David.
Hi, David Giller from Catholic Chapter House. For Bishop. Sorry. Okay, my question is for Bishop Dunn. Another reason why I heard it's called the New Evangelization is because we're evangelizing in a post-Christian world. Where people are baptized or they, think they know the gospel message, and they either reject it or they're lukewarm about it. You were talking about building bridges and presenting the message as, good news. So how do we present that message of the gospel as good news when it is perceived either as negative or shown with indifference?
Well, I think that's the role of witness. The witness, I believe, as Bishop Francois spoke about, is the witness that how do we experience the newness of the gospel in my own life, and as a result of that newness then to be able to sing the new song or speak about the gospel in a new way, or how does Jesus, my relationship, my encounter with Jesus make my humanity different so that I can speak to you and talk with you and engage and encounter you as a human being, and then someone who can follow the Lord as well. So I believe it's that dialogue, that essential dialogue that Paul VI talked about as his first encyclical right after Vatican II was on dialogue. And so dialogue really is the way for us to be a Vatican II church. How do we dialogue together? And so if someone is in the, as you could say, the post-Christian era, how do they speak about, well, what does that mean for them? And how do we hear that? And how do we try to kind of work it together, Dialogues.
Next question in the back.
Thank you. My name is Timothy Scott. I handle communications for the Basilian Fathers, and I'm also on the Theological Commission of the CRC. I have a question for Monseigneur Lapierre. Just a little reflection on me first is that Tom and I were at a meeting of our religious community, and a priest who we respect a great deal said something that really struck me, and that is, in the Catholic Church, we tend to prescribe before we diagnose. That is to say, we move very quickly to solutions. We don't necessarily think carefully about what problems it is we're facing. I've been reading through Paul VI's Evangelization, which dates from 1975. And the key point that strikes me in that document is he says that the first task is that we need to evangelize ourselves. And listening to you, Monseigneur Lapierre, I wonder if that task has yet been properly done. Have we, in fact, evangelized ourselves before moving on to solve the problem, if you will, of evangelizing everybody else?
Monseigneur?
Yeah, you are right, stressing this point. The new sometimes we think that the new evangelization is for the others, but the new evangelization is first for us. It is a renewal inside the church and inside our beings. So this we have not to forget. I'm very much aware, that we see the example with our new Pope. The only fact that he is wearing red, not red, but black shoes. I have heard people who have told me, "Oh, I'm more open now with the church because he is wearing black shoes." So this shows, how the way we are, the way the quality of our own humanity in Christ is very important. We have to recognize that there we have a lot to do, and you are very right to show that if there is not a renewal inside, I think that the new evangelization is not only for the others. Some people are thinking that this new evangelization is a kind of public
Propaganda campaign.
propaganda, or no, I think that this is what I've heard also during the synod. If there is not a real deep conversion, the word conversion has been mentioned several times. In our way of being, I don't think that the new evangelization will really take place.
Thank you. Oui?
L'abbé Julien Guillot, directeur général des fêtes du 350e de Notre-Dame de Québec. La question s'adresse à Monseigneur Lapierre. Il a évoqué au niveau de l'Église un des points que l'Église est davantage organisée pour les pratiquants plutôt que les pèlerins. À Québec, pour parler de l'expérience locale, on reçoit 1 100 000 visiteurs dans notre paroisse, dans les deux églises, la cathédrale et Notre-Dame des Victoires. Et il y a une grande tension par le tourisme religieux de faire de nos lieux de prière des musées. Et la question s'adresse autant aux évêques qu'aux responsables des communautés religieuses dans les enjeux qui se font dans le choix de nos bâtiments pour préserver l'aspect cultuel en tension avec l'aspect culturel. Et donc, est-ce qu'on est conscient de cela dans les choix qu'on fait? On voit à Québec qu'il y a certains choix on est en train de dilapider un bien religieux pour le financer avec l'État dans des compromis. Et éventuellement, on perd l'aspect de l'annonce de l'Évangile dans ce que nous avons comme patrimoine précieux en Amérique du Nord.
Bien, je pense que déjà, dans votre question, il y a une réponse. Moi, je pense que vous touchez là une question que je vois très importante. Quand je dis que notre Église est plus organisée pour des pratiquants que pour des pèlerins, par exemple, souvent, moi, il y a des gens qui me disent, bon, les églises sont fermées une grande partie de la journée. Les portes sont fermées et il n'y a personne pour accueillir. Or, les pèlerins, ils ne se présentent pas à la porte de l'église seulement le dimanche matin pour la messe de 10 heures, où ils se présentent aussi sur semaine, ils aimeraient aller le soir. Il y a des gens qui cherchent des espaces de silence, de contemplation, parce que moi, je crois qu'une dimension importante de la nouvelle évangélisation, c'est la dimension contemplative. Beaucoup de gens vivent dans le bruit, alors ils cherchent des espaces de contemplation, de silence. Et vous avez bien raison de dire que nos églises sont des lieux magnifiques, mais souvent fermés. Et le danger, c'est qu'on les transforme dans des salles ou dans des lieux de rencontre publique, mais qu'ils ne soient plus des lieux vraiment d'expérience de l'adoration, d'expérience de la contemplation, d'expérience de la prière. Alors, il y aurait beaucoup à dire là-dessus. Alors, vous avez bien raison. Moi, je crois qu'on a un immense défi pour organiser notre Église, pour accueillir des pèlerins, parce qu'il y en a beaucoup. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui vont à Compostelle. Je rencontre régulièrement des gens qui vont à Compostelle, mais j'ai hâte que des gens puissent dire « je fais un pèlerinage aussi dans nos réalités ici », et que nos églises deviennent des lieux, des sources, des puits, comme l'a été le puits pour la Samaritaine.
Other question? Yes.
We've heard a lot of criticism of the mass media and anti-Christian it is. I'd like to speak as someone who worked for 31 years in the mass media, and I think that Monseigneur Dunn's suggestion of giving pastoral care to people who work in the mass media is really an excellent suggestion. Because sometimes as Christians, and there are a number of us working for the CBC, for the National Film Board, we find ourselves to be quite isolated when there are core groups of activists who are working in ways that are anti-evangelical. So I find this thought to be really worth considering in terms of, is there something that can be done, an association of people working in the mass media, or breakfasts or luncheons, or something that brings us to work together and to look at ways how we can be the leaven in our jobs in the mass media. That's, yeah.
What is your name? What is your name?
My name is Rachel Cournoyer. I'm a theology student at Concordia.
Personally, I would like to thank you very much for what you said. It's been a high priority for me, and it certainly was the priority for the past 3 months of very close working with the Holy See and the 6,500 accredited journalists that were assigned to the Vatican in February, March, and April. Your message is well heard and is being acted upon right now. Let me just summarize with 5 points that were brought up, or 5 things of follow-up as I listened to the 2 bishops speak. First of all, Bishop Dunn referred to the message of the Synod, and also Bishop Lapierre. This is called the Message to the People of God of the Synod. That's available on the Vatican website, Le Message au Peuple de Dieu du Synode. And having participated in synods and also seen these messages, this particular message was outstanding. And it has a life of its own, even unrelated to the synod, although it was the temporary message, the holding message, until the apostolic exhortation comes out. It's available on the Vatican website in all the different languages. It's also available through the Salt and Light website in French, English, and Chinese. So if you look on the website, you can find the links to that. One of the architects of that message, just for your information, and this has some significance for Canada, was Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. He was one of the stars of the Eucharistic Congress in 2008, and he was one of the writers of that message. And I saw the joy on his face as he came out of the meetings of the writing team. So it's worth paying attention to the beautiful scriptural images of the Samaritan woman and the well and the desert that run through that message. The second point is the apostolic exhortation. Several of you asked me last night if I knew something about it. As in the past, things have taken a long time for that message to come out, especially Verbum Domini, after the Synod of the Word of God. I can tell you now that last Tuesday, the message, the text of the apostolic exhortation was handed to the Pope. The Pope now has it on his desk. Obviously, a lot of that was put together before he took over, because he's only been in office since March the 13th, but he's put a very high priority on getting this message out. So the apostolic exhortation hopefully will be ready in the fall. The third point is covering the synod. A lot of you were aware of the coverage that Salt and Light Television did, and there was a very specific Canadian contribution to this synod which had never taken place. In addition to the bishops, in addition to Cardinal Ouellette's presence, I was named the English language secretary of the synod for the media, at the Synod on the Word of God and also at this synod. I proposed to the Vatican last year that we had to tell the story of the synod, because synods are really for a niche audience, a select group, and most people don't pay attention to it. So I told them, this is what I would like to propose, and I was very surprised that they granted us permission. I said, we need 2 young people on the inside of the synod with our film crew, not just to do cameo photos, but inside. And so the Vatican allowed 2 young people from our staff, Charles Le Bourgeois from our French department, and Sebastian Gomes, to take part in all of the sessions of the synod, public and private. We had a film crew that I got from the Vatican that was given to us, and we televised every day a half-hour program in English and in French, at the heart of inside the synod in English, au cœur du synode in French. There were 30 32 episodes that aired. Those are all stored on our website. But part of the contribution for the Vatican was that we would make a documentary on the Synod in English and one in French and give it to the Vatican as a gift, and they could provide that with the Synod Fathers. So those documentaries are in the editing room now. They're going to be completed in the next 3 weeks. But the pièce de résistance came 2 weeks ago when the Vatican said to me, we want to have a showing of the English version on the 26th of June in the Vatican Theater. There's a special theater, and they're going to bring together the dicasteries of the Synod Office, of Social Communications, and of the New Evangelization. To have inter-religious dialogue like this in the Vatican is pretty significant. And so we will go over and show the Synod, show the Vatican the 1-hour presentation on the Synod in English. They have 1 hour they've allotted for it. Then each of the Synod Fathers will receive a French copy and an English copy, and there'll be some key people from the Vatican there. And that's going to air on our television network simultaneously in June. There'll be a showing in English and showing in French of the best moments of the Synod. We've gone back now and interviewed some of the key participants at the Synod of what they think now that it's over, so it should be a nice thing. The last point, I told you about the website. The synods never really make it to public news. But somehow, with the recent election of Pope Francis and all of the buzz that was created in February and March about evangelization, the synod was resurrected. And it showed up in many of the press conferences we had in Rome in February and March, and people start getting the bug. What is this evangelization thing? Is this about proselytizing? Is this about getting more people to use envelopes? Is this about this? Is it about that? But something is happening. Something is afoot. And on Monday, I have to meet with the producers of 60 Minutes in New York City. They've decided to do a 1-hour program on the new evangelization in light of the events that have happened with Pope Francis. Ça, c'est le premier pas. 60 Minutes, c'est une émission assez importante au monde anglophone, pas seulement aux États-Unis. Et c'est les réalisateurs qui m'ont convoqué au nom du Saint-Siège pour leur aider à formuler une émission qui va durer 1 heure, qui sera présentée en automne prochain. Alors, ce sont des petits pas, mais quand même, ça commence à peut-être donner un nouveau élan et puis nouvelle vie au synode du Vatican II. Thank you very much for your attention.